Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and we're going to be doing today starting a tutorial series on Angular, which I think right now it's Angular 9, but it doesn't matter. As long as it's after the really old version of Angular that's completely different. It's called Angular JS, and that would be angularjs.org. The newer, more modern Angular, slightly more complicated version is called, you go to angular.io. But again, generally, there's trade-offs. Okay, it's a little bit more complex, but you get a lot of new features and a lot of power. And once you learn, that's the thing about Angular. It has a lot of upfront cost. There's a lot to learn, but once you learn it, there's kind of an Angular way of doing everything. So then it's pretty clear on sort of what do you do in this situation, versus like a React where the upfront learning cost isn't as much. It's a pretty straightforward to get the basics of React, but there's so many different ways of doing everything. That the onus is a little bit more on you and thinking what solution you want to implement to solve for your challenges in your particular application. So, it's kind of like the difference between using Express versus like Ruby on Rails. Ruby on Rails kind of has a lot more bells and whistles that does everything for you, so you don't have to worry about like setting, migrating your databases and all this kind of thing. Well, Express pretty much just provides you routing. So how everything else works, you choose which libraries to bring in, you choose how you're going to execute it, it's on you. So just to kind of give you an analogy. But Express is a lot easier to learn than Ruby on Rails. Cool. So with that, in this video, we're going to do is just get our project started. So we're going to hit the docs. Okay, and we're just going to follow the steps to just kind of get our setup. Okay, so we're going to go here and just do all that fun CLI stuff. What we want is the commands to get the CLI installed. Actually, it might be in setup. Here we go, npm package man. Here we go, install the Angular CLI. So first command is this, npm install G. Now the G flag is so that way you install it globally, so that way you just have this available to you anywhere. So let me go here. Actually, let me get to the folder that I'm supposed to be working out of. So cd Angular. Cool. And let's run this command. It doesn't really matter where I run it because it's a global install. And since it is a global install, you're probably going to need to run it as the root user. So sudo npm install. Okay, and this would be the same command if you're on a Mac. I'm on Linux. And if you're on Windows, I highly recommend getting git bash and doing it from there. So that way everything is nice and uniform. But that's going to install. So, and what the CLI will do will allow you to spin up a new Angular project. It'll allow you to generate new components. It's just going to basically allow you to have all these commands to help manage your project along the way. So that's doing that. Let's go back to the documentation. So basically, once that's done installing, we're going to run this command here, ng new my app. So I'm going to pause this while that installs, and then we'll run this command on the other side. Okay, so Angular just got finished installing. So now I'm going to run the command ng new my app. Actually, I'm going to change the name of that. We're going to call it, Angular practice. This will be the name of the application. So ng means it's an Angular command. New means we're creating a new project. And then the third parameter is just whatever you want to call your project. So you hit enter there. And it's going to begin installing. I think it's going to ask you a few questions along the way. So I'm going to we're going to watch this run. So do you want to add Angular routing? So I'm going to say yes, because we're going to go through that and talk about it. So what this does, it'll allow you to like set URLs to go to different parts of your website. Okay, so we're going to say yes to Angular routing. Now it's going to ask you, how would you like to style things? So do you want to just use standard CSS, SCSS, which is the newer version of Sass, or the older version of Sass? There's less and stylus. Less and stylus I'm less familiar with. Just because I don't want to. This is not a Sass lesson. This is not a Sass lesson. So I would usually use SCSS, but we're going to use CSS to keep it simple. Cool. And now it just starts creating your project, and in a little bit you'll have a project installed. So I'm just going to pause it for a second while it does that. Okay, so now that that's installed, let's run it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to cd into the folder. So you can see that a folder got made. So Angular practice, I want to cd into Angular practice. Neat. Okay, and then from there, we're just going to run ngserve. And if you wanted the browser to automatically open up, you can just add the open flag. So what this will do is it'll run a Angular server for any Angular projects in that folder. It'll serve it, and it'll open the browser for you. So that way you don't even have to do that for yourself. How nice. Okay, so let's run that, get this project open, and we'll explore sort of what the files look like inside. So it's coming. Well, while that does that, let's go inside the Angular folder. So this is what your project folder is going to look like. So this Angular practice is our project. Most of this stuff you really don't need to touch, but just so you're aware what it is. TS-lint, that's for linting. I haven't really played with that much, but TS always stands for TypeScript, so it has to do with TypeScript. Your TS-config.json is where you set all your settings for TypeScript, because Angular uses TypeScript. TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript created by Microsoft. It just adds things like typing, interfaces, stuff that isn't already in JavaScript on top of the latest JavaScript standards to allow you to use all your JavaScript knowledge, but still have some of the tools that other languages give you to really help create code that doesn't break. Which can be something to get used to. Because usually in JavaScript, you have dynamic typing. So you're just used to saying, okay, this variable exists, and it's whatever I tell you it is. But in TypeScript, you're typing. So you actually have to say, hey, this variable is a number. This variable is a string. And when you have like weird special types, you have to define those types and say, hey, this is actually an object that has these two properties. And it gets a little, can be a little frustrating making sure you always define your types and you define them right and having to change them when you make changes. But the benefit is as you create huge sprawling projects, those types will help you catch mistakes, data that didn't come in the way you expected it. So that way you know where those mistakes are, because it says, hey, this didn't match the type. So you're like, okay, something's wrong with how that information is going into here. While without it, it would just go in there and you'd have to wait for a runtime error to catch the problem. So that's the benefit of TypeScript. I have a separate series of videos on TypeScript I highly recommend watching. Okay, but this is sort of the basic page that it's going to open up when you start Angular. Okay, let's play with it. But let's go back to our project. So you have your tsconfig.json. Okay, and then this is just another TypeScript config folder file. I wouldn't really worry about these too much. I would just leave them alone. This is just the README that comes with Angular. This is your package.json folder. So you can see you have all these scripts already built into your project that you can use. So you have your ng command, then you have your npm run start build. Although your ng command will kind of do everything. Then we have your package lock. You never have to worry about that. Karma is a testing tool, so it's there if you want to do testing, or if you want to use other testing libraries, you can bring those in yourself. So basically nothing here you really got to be touching too much. It's mostly just configuration files. Your Git folder, you don't need to worry about that, so it automatically creates a Git repository for you. That's nice of them. This is just your folder for your end-to-end testing if you decide to use Karma for testing purposes. Node modules. Oh, why did I open that? Well, you know what Node modules is. It's all your dependencies from Node. You never need to touch that. So everything really is in your source folder. In your source folder, you have your index.html, okay, which really you don't need to change much here. Maybe we want to change the title, put a space between Angular and practice. That's it. Otherwise, that does what it needs to do. It puts your root component in there, and that's all that matters. Okay, this styles.css, this is where you can put global styles. So if you just wanted to put a CSS style that applies to all of your different parts of your Angular app, you could put them here, or you could just put all your CSS in here. Depends how you like to do it. One of the benefits of using frameworks like Angular, Vue, and React is that you can break everything down into components. So oftentimes it's nice to have your CSS sort of separate. So that way you don't have to worry about it. But you might want to define some basic, universal colors and theme type things here. Cool. Assets, this is just going to be like where you put like images, stuff you may want to refer to. Environments is if you're going to have like a staging and production environment. Again, that's a bit more advanced stuff I wouldn't be worried about. So really everything comes down to your app folder. Okay, and in your basic app folder, you see an app routing module. Okay, this basically is your router. This is going to tell you where all your routes are. Okay, we'll play with that later on. This is your root component. Well, that's the CSS. So basically every component has 3 files. There's the app, or whatever the component's name is, .component.css. This is the CSS for that component. This is the HTML, the template for that component, the HTML file. So this one's, you see this one, they decided to do it all, the styling inside the HTML file, which is their prerogative. I'm going to basically keep everything but the router outlet. I'll leave the router outlet at the bottom. I want that there, so that way the router can work. So I'm going to delete all that. And then we're just going to put h1. Well, first we're going to make a basic HTML file. Actually, I don't even think I need to do that. h1 hello world. And just do that. Cool. Save. Now if we go back and take a look at our file here, it's going to reiterate and all that's going to be gone. So I'm waiting for it to do. Hello world. Cool. And then if I wanted to, I could define any CSS over here. So I could be like, here I would just be like h1 color is blue. So that should change the font color. Save. And now we have a blue hello world. And then all your JavaScript would technically be in this TypeScript file, so app.component.ts. So here you would like, basically this represents your component. This is what's called the TypeScript Decorator. So essentially the way a decorator works, it really, like, it doesn't matter to use this, but just so you understand, what a decorator does is that it runs a function and kind of wraps whatever comes after it in a function that kind of adds stuff to it. So what this is essentially doing is by using this component decorator, it's wrapping itself around this class and giving it the properties that are needed for it to function as an Angular component. Okay, now how exactly they made that work, you don't need to worry about that, but that's essentially what the component's doing. It wraps itself around whatever is after it. So you can do that with functions, with whatever. Again, most of the time you don't create your own decorators in TypeScript. Most of the time the libraries you use, because decorators are technically still an experimental feature of TypeScript. It's not even an official like feature. So at least at the time that I'm doing this video, which is early 2020. Cool. But basically saying your components selector, so your HTML tag is app root. So if we go back to your index.html, we see that. Oh, there it is, app root. And then let's go back to that. We're saying template URL, like where do we get the HTML for this component? From that file. So that was the app component HTML. Where do we get any extra CSS? Right in that file. And then that's it. And then here you can define variables, functions, anything you want to use in that component. So I'm going to get rid of this since I deleted all the original stuff. And we're going to just create a variable called name. And it's going to say, here is a name. Save. And then if I want to show that, I just go back to my HTML. And then I just, anytime I want to plop in a variable, I just type in the 2 brackets, so 2 curly brackets, and the variable name. And that should do it, which is nice because the old AngularJS, it was a little bit more complicated in doing that. You have to kind of do this and all that stuff. So here they kind of, you don't have to worry about that. So there you go, hello world, here is name. So so basically already just with this you can start kind of making some fun stuff with your website. And I'm going to stop there for this first video, but now you kind of know how to maneuver around the file structure in Angular. You see there are extra files here in this app folder, just to kind of revisit them. There's app.module. What's going to happen is that there's a lot of other features of Angular. But if you just were to include them all right away, your final bundle, when the thing gets compiled, is going to be really big. And that means your website's going to load a little bit slower on its initial load, also oftentimes referred to as its first paint. And that's not what you want. you want the site to load up fast. So what Angular does, it says, come over here and tell us when you need certain features. And if you need the feature, put it in here, and then when it'll be available to you going forward, just specify it here. So that's what these imports are. We're saying, hey, we need the browser module, and we need the app routing module, which is what powers the router, which was over here. Okay? And again, just because I declare them here, I'm still going to have to kind of do my imports here and there for certain things. So keep that in mind, but that's what this does. It imports certain features, certain functionality of Angular. So oftentimes if you know of an Angular feature and you're using it and it's not working, it's because you forgot to import it. This is probably kind of the most annoying thing, because if you use the old Angular JS, everything just kind of worked right out of the box because you brought in the whole library. But that results in much bigger bundle sizes. I mean, you're talking about significantly bigger. Okay, adding like another 100 kilobytes. This helps shrink it down, and then in the future they're coming out with, I forget, I think it's like Eve or some sort of compiler they're building. Oh, Basil. Some sort of compiler that's going to be bundled with Angular. They already have it experimentally. That's going to help that get even smaller by further, looking in there and assessing your project to get smaller bundle sizes, because that's kind of the competition. That's always been sort of the knock on Angular, that you end up with bigger bundle sizes than the others. So they're trying to address that and still have these robust amount of tools. Cool. And then the last folder file is this spec.ts. That's just for testing. So unless you're doing testing, don't worry about it. We're not going to go over testing in this video series. So I'll leave it at that. I'll see you guys in the next video.